Okay, today we are going to talk about effective uses of technology within our sports medicine course. We are going to cover managing records as well as communicating records, um, whether that be to a student from myself or to a parent from myself, and also how we can use those, whether we have parent-teacher conferences or parent-teacher and student conferences or just conversations between myself and a student. Secondly, we're going to talk about housekeeping records and things we do in order to keep our athletic training room not only safe but in working order. Um, excuse me. Thirdly, we'll talk about steps we take to assure equipment is kept in the shape it needs to be in well working order. That way it does not cause harm to anyone or cause any malfunctions. And then fourthly, or lastly, I should say, we will be talking about a plan to engage students. As far as records, obviously the first thing with records for myself that comes to mind is grades or a grade book. All my grades are done electronically and kept on a grade book ran through Aries. This is what we use school-wide. It allows for ease of access if a coach needs to check grades, or if we have a conversation with another teacher regarding a specific student, because we do have a lot of academies on our campus. So a lot of us teachers work hand in hand on a daily basis in educating our students. One thing about the gradebook is it is completely accessible to parents through our parent portal system. So parents have complete access to see how their students are doing, whether it's homework assignments, lab assignments, test scores. Also allows parents, if they have a concern, to reach out if I have not already reached out to the parent myself. It also allows for when if a student has a question about how they can improve their grade in my class, I can quickly pull it up with ease of access, or the student can pull it up as well on their Chromebook. And what that does is it really allows us to have the data right in front of us when we start talking about specific things a student needs to work on. Also with rubrics, when we do hands-on assignments, I can look at the rubric and not only show them where they may have struggled if they have not already seen that. Usually we give them back to them at the end of the day when that assignment is done. But I also make comments about ways they can improve their scores. So I have found that to be very helpful. Communication records, school-wide, something that we do is anytime we have parent contact or contact with a student or a disciplinary issue with a student, we are to log all of that in the Aries system. Most of the time it's negative things that have been logged. However, I have found logging even positive conversations, if I do need to talk to a parent, I believe it's always good to not focus solely on the negative, but talk about the positive things the student is doing as well. And by having those records, I can say, well, on this date the student was doing this well, but this next day he struggled in this area, or we had a problem in class with this. And I found that to be truly helpful with making sure students are really getting an education, but they're also becoming responsible for their education, as I teach mostly juniors and seniors, and they will be off to school or a trade school or in the work field, and they're going to have to learn to take some responsibility for their actions and behavior. Secondly, housekeeping records. So we have a lot of equipment in a sports medicine class as well as our sports medicine clinic. Excuse me. The first thing we do as far as housekeeping before anyone even touches anything is a brief safety course. And when I say brief, it's brief. Not only do we do a general safety course, but before we get into each modality, there's things of safety concern that need to be covered with students. Not only are they going to be using these modalities on each other in a lab setting, but as I've stated in the past, we do after school hours. So if they're helping with treatments, they're going to be using it on student athletes who are not necessarily in the course. One of the biggest things that we talk about is supervision. At all times, if a student is using a modality, they need to be supervised by myself. The reason for that isn't really so much a trust issue, as if there was a trust issue, the student would probably not have access to the modalities. It's more so for safety. Um, the last thing we want to do is put settings into a modality and put them on an athlete, and the student not really have an understanding of what is going on. Um, when that happens, potentially the athlete can be harmed. For example, with therapeutic ultrasound, if the settings are not on, correct or done put in correctly, there is a potential from actually burning a student, and it even goes as far as burning the bone. Basically, you're cooking a person from the inside out when not used properly. So that's one thing we have to be very careful of. As far as when we use e-stim or electrical stimulation for whether reducing spasms or pain relief, there is a potential of electrical burns as well. So all students are taught about using modalities correctly, things that can go wrong, and what to do if an athlete is uncomfortable, how we immediately cut off that modality, cut the power to it. That way there is no harm done. But like I said, I'm always within a few feet of the modality just in case something were to go wrong. We also talk about materials that need to be checked out sometimes if you're doing a project or for an assignment. All students are to sign out, and like Dr. Hughes had also said in his brief lecture, students are, I don't want to say tricked into responsibility for the items, but they know they are to take responsibility for the items, and if something were to happen to them, that it is on their name. We can't do it with all items, but some items we could put on their account, such as textbooks, or if they check out a book or a video. Thirdly, I want to talk about preventative maintenance, and this is huge, seeing that it is a medical, a class that has to do with the medical field. Excuse me. All of our modalities need to be updated once a year and recertified. The reason for that is to make sure they're working properly, they're working when you input certain parameters, that they are working within those parameters and not at a higher intensity or even a lower intensity. If they're at a lower intensity, the athlete isn't getting the treatment that they need, and they're not getting the full effects of a treatment. If it's too high, obviously it could potentially cause harm. And students are also taught as well, when we go out to sports or if they travel with a sports team, how to check out first aid kits, if they're taking coolers for water or bottles, and coaches also play a role in this. Their coaches are aware of what they're taking, and if it's left behind or it's damaged by the team, that the team will pay for it out of their account from ASB. So what we do is we take basically kind of like a receipt, and then we have it laminated and it's zip tied to all of our equipment. So it's zip tied onto our first aid kit, and it lists the contents and how much each thing costs. And that's easy for us to keep track of if something is lost, how it can be replaced, and they have an idea about how much it's going to cost as well. I actually implemented that system this year for the first time out of the last 3. So I have seen there's a much less incident of things being lost or left behind when teams are traveling. So that's been fantastic. It's saved all of us money, and I've got all of the equipment back, as well as students being able to use the equipment time after time. So it's been great. Plans for engaging students. My class is required to complete a minimum of 45 lab hours a semester after school. The nice part about these lab hours is it's not necessarily a lab setting. It's a real life sports med setting. I'm a certified athletic trainer, So my main job at the high school is taking care of our athletes. In addition, I teach 2 courses of sports med. Um, but what is great about that is when students are getting hands-on time after school, it's all real things. It's not like we had a makeup artist and come in and make a laceration on someone. These are all real injuries. So students really get to learn and see, and sometimes depending on the injury, they get to get their hands on and see what an injury feels like. With, let's say, with a knee, if we have an ACL sprain, they get to, after I go through and do my evaluation, if the student athlete is willing, the students get to practice their orthopedic test to see the difference, what it feels like between an uninjured knee and an injured knee, as well as when we have fractures. Obviously, you need more than one set of hands to have someone stabilize the limb, someone to get the splint, and then we work together. But students are always taught beforehand how to manage those situations, so it's not like it's their first time doing it. But what I have found is when we're in that setting, it also sparks curiosity in my students, and what happens is it leads to very educational conversations when there may be 4 or 5 students with me, but when we go in the class the next day and there's 30 students, at the beginning of class I kind of ask them to talk about their experience and what they learned and questions that they had after the fact once they went home. And there's been some times when we've had medical emergencies or where we've had to call 911, where it has sparked such a conversation where it actually takes a great deal of the class period, which gets us off schedule, but at the same time, you're really seeing students take their curiosity and develop educational questions in how can we apply what we've learned in the past if something would have gone differently. And that has been really neat to see from a standpoint for me as an athletic trainer, but as an educator to them as well. They're really getting, I'm seeing them take the classroom into the real world setting, and they're connecting the two, and that has been fantastic. That pretty much wraps it up for this lesson. Thank you.